Welcome back to another episode of What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. Want to know what it's really like to be an entrepreneur? Well, you came to the right place. Whether you're already an entrepreneur or looking to start your journey tomorrow, or just someone who needs a little extra motivation to get through the day, this is the perfect podcast for you. This is the place where you will learn exactly what it's like in the world of entrepreneurship and hear authentic stories of entrepreneurs grinding on each episode. My goal for this podcast is to help you realize that giving up is never an option. If you missed the last episode, be sure to download it after you tune in today. And before I introduce my guest, I'll share another entrepreneurial story to inspire you all. This one is a great one, and I'll introduce Colonel Sanders. The Colonel you see on Kentucky Fried Chicken or KFC's logo is not just a fictional cartoon character, but a real person. An entrepreneur who also didn't become a chef professionally before he was 40 years old. I included that because I think it's important for you to realize as entrepreneurs to never compare your chapter to somebody else's, because he didn't even franchise KFC until he was 62 years old. Display that patience, entrepreneurs. Creating greatness does not happen overnight. And as if it wasn't enough patience for him, he didn't even become an icon till after he sold the company at 75 years old. Here's a little backstory on him. He was born in 1890, but it wasn't until 1939 when he found the consistency he was looking for with his famous 11 herbs and spices. He used a new pressure cooker to accomplish this. In 1952, he made a deal to sell his chicken dish as Kentucky Fried Chicken in exchange for a 4-cent royalty on every piece sold to another restaurateur. And once it became a bestseller, he started, duplicating this process with other restaurants. But once a new interstate was built and it bypassed this restaurant, it caused him to sell at a loss, leaving him with only income of $105 per month from his Social Security check. He now tried his best to franchise KFC. By 1963, he had more than 600 restaurants across the U.S. and Canada selling Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sanders soon then agreed to sell his rights for $2 million, which is equivalent to what it said is $15.1 million in 2015 dollars. But this was back in 1965. I learned finally that the Colonel traveled 250,000 miles each year visiting KFC locations and promoting the brand in media. And I really admire this work ethic, especially as an entrepreneur, because he never wanted to get rich, but wanted to be remembered for his work, and he certainly did that. I was now known in 115 countries. Todd, what'd you like best about that story?
Well, Vince, I think my favorite part about the Colonel is his persistence, especially in the times we're looking at here in 2020. It is such a focus on persistence is what's going to carry that entrepreneur from startup to success, or if they're struggling, to consistency and then revamping the business here in 2020.
Yeah, it's just like back then in a way where you have to find ways to continue to succeed, change up. It took him so long to find a way to get what he was looking for, and it took him to get this pressure cooker to get it because he had these 11 herbs and spices, constantly pivoting as an entrepreneur.
Well, I think the thing I like about the Colonel the most is, he's over 50. Was he over 50, over 60 years old? He's driving around the country, living in the back of his car, trying to sell it. And if the legend serves correctly, he went on over 1,000 appointments before he got his first sale. And I always ask myself, and then I ask my coaching clients, is there anything in your life that you're so passionate about that you'll fail at 1,000 times before getting right?
I love the way you put that. I learned that quickly as an entrepreneur, that most of the things I'm going to have to do is to fail and trial and error and learn from my mistakes, put that piece of what worked in and try it again.
Well, it's so important. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Dr. Daniel Friedland. And he talks about, failure is nothing more than a journey on your path to being successful. And if we can, as entrepreneurs, if we're able to recognize and reframe that failure really doesn't exist, that every mistake that you make or every misstep that you take is a learned opportunity, and from that learning you make a pivot, you make a change, and it's that culmination, that satisfying journey that really I think can get an entrepreneur to a new level. At least I know for me it was huge to remember that failure isn't permanent; it's just temporary.
I love the way you put that. It's definitely a mindset, and that's how you achieve greatness. But that voice you just heard, that's the sound of today's guest. My guest on the show today is someone who is a referral from an earlier guest on the show, and I'm glad we connected because we're very like-minded. As an entrepreneur and active CEO, Todd knows the struggles business owners face regarding people, cash, strategy, and execution. He took his company from being $600,000 in debt to making the Inc. 5000 as one of America's fastest growing companies, not once, not twice, but 6 times. Todd Palmer is an executive coach, keynote speaker, a renowned thought leader, author, and CEO who is committed to helping business owners tackle their obstacles and clear their paths to success. Allow me to now introduce Todd Palmer. Todd, thanks for joining my show.
Vince, I'm so happy to be here. It's a great opportunity for me to connect with you and your audience.
Absolutely. Would you mind please previewing your story, introduce yourself to our listeners without giving just too much away about that entrepreneurial journey?
For sure. So I think my entrepreneurial journey started when I was about 12 years old. I grew up in a small farm town here in Michigan, and I'd go to school, and we had this thing called fireballs. They were individually wrapped pieces of candy. I could buy them for a nickel, and I could sell them for a quarter. And I knew I was onto something when I got pulled into the office by the principal and told that I was taking advantage of other students because essentially I'd figured out this inflection point where there was an increased demand and a diminished supply for the candy world. So from there, I figured out mid-20s that I was going to be much better served as an entrepreneur versus being an employee. I had a lot of ideas. I had a lot of fire in my belly, but I wasn't really good at following the rules. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, as you probably have experienced, don't follow the rules really well. So when I was 27 years old, I was a single dad, just got in custody of my son. And I decided I was going to start a business. And the main reason why was not to become a financial success, but I felt like I was one of the first millennials. I was willing to trade a little bit of financial freedom for freedom and flexibility of my time so I could spend it with my son. So that would be the beginning of that real entrepreneurial journey. I started my first company, Diversified Staffing Services, in 1997.
I love how you put that too, trading the immediate financial gains for happiness. Your son is obviously your son. You don't want to miss those moments, and you were able to make that sacrifice professionally and look at all the great things you built. So I'm very, very excited to learn this journey because being on that Inc. list 6 times is definitely something you could add value to for our listeners. But Todd, it's time for the big 5. And on each episode, what I do is my guests and I go over these 5 questions to help you, the listeners, learn what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. You ready to go?
Let's go.
Great. So you may have just briefed us, which is perfect. When did you realize that you weren't happy with what you were doing, or that you just needed a change or had to make this change to truly start this entrepreneurial endeavor?
It really did come down to looking at the career path back in the mid 90s. There would be required a lot of travel. There would be requiring a lot of politics and a lot of bureaucratic things that I just knew instinctually I wasn't good at. I went to college to become a journalist. I wanted to be an investigative reporter. So I think with that mindset, I'm a chaos creator, a bit of a pot stirrer, and a chief rule breaker, so to speak. And I knew that I could not get where I wanted to go by doing the corporate route. The other thing that I recognized and realized that being a single dad, that was my number one job. My number one job is to be a single dad, to raise my son. His name is Tyler, and to really put a platform in our lives so we could spend as much time together. Because the reality was I grew up without a father, and I lost my father when I was 5 years old. He passed away, and I didn't want my son to have those feelings of emptiness that a lot of entrepreneurs feel, that black hole within of growing up without that role model. So I thought, the most important thing for me was I want to be able to control my time. I want to, try and do as much financial success as possible, recognizing reading the tea leaves of the corporate world. I wasn't going to get those things by taking that traditional corporate path.
I agree with you. There's a lot of pros and cons to the corporate side. For me, one pro was the financial stability. I had the MBA, I had the finance degree, I was making great money. But once I started really realizing that every minute I was taking away from this, my passion, my books, my giving back through my story, the podcast, I was that much further from creating my dreams. So eventually I chose the flexibility as well. And I haven't looked back, to be honest.
Well, there's a myth of stability. I mean, look at our world. We're talking now here, it's March 2020, and there's not a whole lot that's stable. And if you take a look back at history, change is always going to happen. As entrepreneurs, we have to be very good at pivoting and reinventing ourselves. But it's the same for employees. And I remember growing up in Detroit, and automotive was everything at one point in our community. Well, fast forward to 2020, it's not as big a part of our landscape. It's a piece of it for sure. But I know the big resurgent for Detroit, coming out of bankruptcy years ago, has been the efforts of entrepreneurs like Dan Gilbert and Josh Linkner and other people who brought new business, different business to the city, because we have to consistently be open to changing and open to reinvention. So the myth of stability, it's just that. It's just a myth.
I just think all good things do come to an end. Eventually things go stale. You can only beat a horse to death so many times in a business idea or a route I take. You always have to reinvent yourself. I love how you put that.
Well, when it comes to reinvention, I deal with that a lot with my entrepreneurs in my coaching practice. And I always challenge them that don't be afraid of change. Know what's going to happen. So the antidote to change, the proactiveness to change, is to be a lifelong learner. Consistently be listening to podcasts like yours, be reading, be watching thought leaders in the entrepreneurial space, for example, like a Cameron Herold or a Vern Harnish or even a Mark Cuban. Watch what they're doing. See where they're looking at. Mark Cuban was famous for saying his number one job every day is to go out and read and learn and challenge himself, because that one good idea could change his world.
Yes.
How do we do that so that we know that we are best positioned to create a life by design that includes entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of learning. Learning never stops until you want it to. And, that's when it kind of all ends, I feel, because you always have to find a way to reposition yourself, like you said, take that step ahead of your competition, find new ways to provide value. And reading, podcasts, we have a lot of resources right in front of us that people don't use.
Well, and that's I have to I'm doing a webinar today for a group of entrepreneurs out of Denver, Colorado, and that's exactly the theme: is how can we reposition ourselves? How can we continue to learn? What steps do we need to take? And from my experience, it all comes from a mindset shift. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And when we shift into having a growth mindset, even in times of tragedy, we see opportunity. Even in times of stress and self-doubt, there are ways to come out of that a lot of entrepreneurs don't know. And what happens is when they feel burdened, they feel like quitting. And like as you talked about in the intro, like with Colonel Sanders, I can't imagine being a 60-year-old man driving around in my non-air conditioned car, basically living in it, striving to take a look at how can I grow my dream at that age. But he did it. So there's inspiration in tragedy. There's opportunity in disappointment. We just have to be looking for it.
Absolutely. Awareness is very key, and the education and knowledge plays just as equal and a part. But Todd, now that you're on this entrepreneurial path for a long time, I'm very interested in this answer because there is a lot of them. What are one or two of the most difficult parts for you of being an entrepreneur?
Oh my gosh. The biggest I've had a couple big challenges. One was dealing with my imposter syndrome, and called the itty bitty negative committee in my head. That was a real challenge. It goes back to the mindset. I had a very fixed mindset for so long. I thought the path of success, in quotes, was a straight line, when really it's a jagged, crooked, messy figure eight type of journey that no one told me about. That was huge. And going back to being a single parent, I would bring that stress home. I would not always show up and be my best self. And I think that to that point, then, as I've over the course of being an entrepreneur for nearly a quarter century, I've realized that there's no such thing as work-life balance, but there is work-life integration. And how do we upfront have those conversations with our family, with our clients? One of the things that I offer in my coaching business, I call it concierge service. I tell my clients I'm available to you basically 24/7, 365. When you're hijacked, when your imposter syndrome is screaming at you, call me, reach out to me, and I'll do my best to get on a call. The flip side of that is I have to negotiate that with my family so that they know that when I'm fully with them, I'm fully with them. But if a client calls, I can step out of that relationship, because last summer, for example, on a Wednesday, we went to the park at 2:00 in the afternoon. Not a lot of people can do that. So if we want to have those type of cool opportunities as a family, then we may have to give up, a Sunday for a client who's up in crisis, and how can I be of service to them? But over the totality, there is work-life integration.
I just love how you're basically making a point here about communication, which is essential to any business, let alone family life. You're openly communicating. Everybody's on the same page. I really like how you said that.
Well, it's especially now in times. I think the biggest challenge of leadership in leadership is a huge piece of entrepreneurship, is to be able to clearly communicate. And it's not even a matter so much of knowing the result of your communication. Think of the Stockdale paradox from the legendary book Good to Great. Stockdale talked about he had to communicate to his troops. I have to have unwavering faith that we're going to get out of this difficult internment camp. But the brutal reality is we're here. So we have to deal with both what we're currently dealing with, where we'd like to go, and have unwavering faith we're going to get there. But he couldn't tell them when they were going to get out or how it was going to work. If you flip that to today's world of shutdowns and changes and pivots and all the stresses that so many entrepreneurs are dealing with, how do we then communicate with our teams that we will get through this, but the business will probably look different? There will be change, there will be reinvention, but within that, there's going to be great opportunities for this business, for you as an employee, and for me as the entrepreneur.
It's another great point there where, as we're recording this, everybody, we're in the middle of this Corona epidemic, and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, like you said, change isn't bad. It's just different, and you can adapt to that and pivot based on your mindset is a huge, huge part. And once you get out of your own way and get those voices out of their head, man, you hit it on the head there.
Well, one of the questions I get often asked is, how do you get the voices out of your head? And recognize and realize that, at least for me, in my experience with myself, as well as many of my clients, our imposter syndrome for a long time is in the driver's seat of our car. If our business or our life is a car, an example, in the imposter syndrome, the fear, the self-doubt, the negativity is driving that car, then that negativity is going to be the leader of that vehicle. If we can recognize it, if we switch seats, we get out of the passenger seat of our life, get into the driver's seat, we can then take charge. Now, in this scenario, remember, in the passenger seat is sitting our fear, our self-doubt, and our imposter syndrome. It's still going to be talking to us. If our fight and flight and those fears once served us well to get us out of danger, at one point they were needed. So we're still going to hear them, but recognize that we can make different choices if we have high self-awareness, if we get to a higher level of creativity and fulfillment versus fight and flight. Because really, from my experience, the imposter syndrome was fight or flight thinking. It's win-lose. If you get to a higher level, you can do an and both scenario where you're able to deal with life, deal with setbacks, deal with success differently.
I love how you put that. While we're on the topic of awareness and, learning, pivoting, what would you say one of your greatest failures or lessons learned is, and what did it teach you?
Oh, goodness. My greatest fear my greatest failure came around communication. In 2006, my business got $600,000 in debt under my leadership. And I wasn't communicating with my staff. I wouldn't lean into the uncomfortable conversations with the team I had. I was avoiding them. My imposter syndrome became my depression. I could not get out of bed. So I'm $600,000 in debt and I'm not talking about it. I have a toxic and dysfunctional culture. I'm not correcting the team. I'm not getting the wrong people off my bus and getting the right people potentially on my bus. At that point, then I recognized finally that I needed to reach out for help. And I hired a coach. And what we did is we took a look at how I got financially so far off track, combined with what I needed to do differently with my team. And I made the very difficult and painful choice of I fired everybody in one day and I started over because I wasn't communicating. I then adopted programs like The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack so I could communicate better with my team. I had open and honest financial conversations with my team. Every week we had a big board in our office. If the number was green, we made money. If the number was red, we didn't make money. And we would talk about it. Why didn't we make money? What did we do? And as the leader, I would say, I believe in the team. I believe in the process. We're doing a lot of the right things. We have to do a couple different ways. So I will cover those losses so that they knew that they were safe, they were taken care of, and they were protected. But they also knew over the course of time, if red continued to show up, then changes were going to happen with the staff.
I love how you're putting that, just the theme of this episode is going to be this communication, I can tell, because of all the benefits it provides. If everybody's on the same page, there's no issue. Everybody learns together, we grow together, we strategize together. In my personal experiences, I've learned, avoiding confrontation just in turn creates more confrontation. Can start every part of my business. I can pick any part of these 6 years. When I was doing, my book was done, right? I had 5 people in my inner circle, 6 people. I said, hey, if you don't have time, it's okay. But would you mind taking a look? One person next day, one person 2 days later. A couple other people never even called, text. I'm just waiting like for 2 months. No communication. Would have been fine. But I would have just pivoted, found new people. It's no big deal, I said, but the communication is in every part of business, and it seems like it's paid off a bit.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about communication. People don't like to, we talk about as recruiters that, we often challenge our clients. We need to get feedback on Vince's interview. How did he do? And the client wouldn't tell us because maybe Vince wasn't what they needed or Susie wasn't what they were looking for. But once
Right.
we had an honest conversation, then we could give feedback to the candidate. If that candidate wasn't a good fit for them, we could go out and seek new candidates for them. And with that candidate who is still maybe a great person, but not a great fit for that organization, then we can seek out other opportunities for them. But it all came down to communication. I always tell other coaches and other business leaders that I run to, we always talk about cash, strategy, execution, and people. I argue that really, if we really want to simplify business, it's cash, strategy, execution, and staff, because every problem in business always comes down to the people and how they use the cash, the people and how they execute the strategy, the people and how they pick and choose and don't lean into uncomfortable conversations. Keep people around who maybe should be freed up to go do something else. It's always people, and it's always how those people choose to communicate, how they choose to show up, how they choose to be authentic, transparent, vulnerable, and open.
I love it. But Todd, if you could choose to communicate and have a conversation and learn from any entrepreneur, we're talking dead or alive, who would it be? Paint that picture for our listeners.
There's so many great entrepreneurs out there. It's really, really hard to pick one. When I think of some of the greatest conversations I've had with entrepreneurs, it's been with someone that your audience would never have heard of. I've been really fortunate to be part of a group called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. It's a global organization. And I've had some of the greatest entrepreneurial conversations with my peers, with people who've suffered from imposter syndrome, from people who've gone to great heights in their business, and all of a sudden their marketplace was gone. And then what did they do? Often what we'll do is we'll refer back to a classic book like Good to Great or the Rockefeller Habits. So my experience with entrepreneurs is it's been sometimes the people who are sitting next to me at dinner or the people sitting across from me at coffee are the greatest entrepreneurs to talk about. So I think about, someone in your group may run into a Brian Scudamore of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. He's a friend of mine. Great stories. There's a great book out there called WTF, Willing to Fail. I think of, guys in my EO Detroit group, Scott Rice, a Scott Jackson, a Brian Dietz, a David Petoskey. Those are people most of your group will never have heard of. But the point of sharing those names, the point of sharing the story is your network can be your most valuable asset. If you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a network of other entrepreneurs, go find one. Get in a mastermind group. Listen to podcasts like Vince. Check out, get a coach. Get someone who you can run ideas past. Because if you're living in a vacuum and you're only watching Shark Tank or The Profit, which are great shows, and I watch them too, you're limiting your sphere of knowledge to only the uber famous. There's great entrepreneurs in a lot of these towns, so reach out to them.
You make two great points here. One, everybody listening on, if you haven't been to my website, the desktop version is a little more valuable than the mobile, but I have what's called a podcast network. I have everybody on there who's been on the show and a little audio transcription of, that show. Reach out to these people. I have where some episodes have their more information because they requested more, and I provide that as a service for cost. But also, I didn't discriminate based on any year of startup for season one because you can get stories from everybody. You don't know where that golden nugget is going to come from anybody's story. So I'm not going to discriminate. Oh, you've been in business only 2 years? Let me hear what you've done. Maybe you can help somebody.
Vince, that's such an awesome point. I remember made the Inc. 5000 6 times, right? Getting everybody to go speak at universities and in front of business groups. And I'd always say to people, I'd say, hey, listen, if you want to, I said, this is my line. Listen, I love to eat. So if you want to buy me lunch, I'm always available. I wanted to reach out to entrepreneurs and I would encourage them to connect with me. And a lot of people would come up, oh yeah, let's get together. I want to pick your brain and maybe you can help me with my business or maybe I can run an idea about it. In 6 years of being on the Inc. 5000, I had one person take me up on it. And it was a college kid who had more gumption and more ambition. And
love that. Love hearing that.
So I think you're dead on when you can share the knowledge and there are people who want to talk to you. I think we assign status by title. We assign status by lists. And I think there's such value in people reaching out. So I guess I'll put it out there now. Anybody who wants to reach out to me and have a conversation, email me at todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. I'm happy to jump on a call with you, because it's that share of knowledge that goes into the why of why I do the coaching, the why I do the podcast is to improve lives. So don't self-select out of that process with someone who could potentially mentor you or coach you or be a resource to you.
I love how you put that, and I will definitely have all your other information shared towards the end of the episode, because I love connecting. And granted, a lot of my early episodes, some of them were in my interconnection, but you know how many episodes I would have if I didn't take chances reaching out to people like you, just trying to get more valuable insight on this show? Probably have 5 episodes. You know what I mean? People are so scared sometimes to just take that leap. What's the worst that happens? They don't answer the email. Nothing changes. Like, come on.
You've lost by risking nothing. You've gained nothing. Not have you lost anything. And especially for, I would say, a startup entrepreneur or a younger entrepreneur. And again, now we have startup entrepreneurs who are 50 years old too.
Yeah.
Everybody was a rookie. Everybody was a startup. We remember those days, and there was always either a very forward-facing person like my coach who I used, but there's been hundreds of conversations and unknown mentors who've been of service to me. The only way we grow a global community of entrepreneurs is to give back.
And you look at our story we had today, Colonel Sanders, 50, 60, 70 before he made what he wanted. That's, and people are 15, 16, 17, 20 college grads. I was one of the college grads. Why isn't it here yet? Why aren't I not hitting success? Everybody's impatient, but you need patience, and you have to be able to pivot in this industry. But Todd, you've done so much remarkable stuff in your career. You've grown so much. You've hit that ink list. Let's look into the future with our listeners here. We're going to go 1 year and 5 years out. Where do you see yourself in all of these entrepreneurial endeavors 1 year from today? Paint that picture for us.
So in 1 year from today, my second book will be out. It's on the entrepreneurial journey. If you had asked me this question 30 days ago, I said, I'd be speaking from stage. I'd be out in the world. Well, now with our COVID issues out there, my goal is really, my objective is, my intention is, I want to be talking to as many people as possible to pass on the value of entrepreneurship, to talk about the crooked line of success, so that people don't start the journey thinking it's going to be easy. It's going to be a straight line from bottom to top. I want to be continuing to coach the clients I have. I'm looking to add new clients to my stable of people that I'm working with. And ultimately, I guess really what I want to do, whether it's 1 year from now or 10 years from now, is I want to be able to leave a large enough wake behind my entrepreneurial boat where I've been able to have the blessing of leaving a legacy with people. I was on stage in Toronto about a year and a half ago, and it was a mixed audience. And I typically had not been doing mixed audiences because I didn't think my business message would land. Well, at the end of my speech, a young man, 9 years old, his name was Alec, came up to me and he had drawn a diagram of what my speech meant to him. And it was about leaning into the uncomfortable and how failure was not a construct. And I said the word failure 12 times. He had failure written out 12 times on these little boxes. And at the bottom, the big word was success. He goes, so Mr. Todd, if I just keep failing, eventually I'm going to be successful. So I'm not even going to worry about it. And he shook my hand, and I may never see this kid again, but he made an impact on me. And if I can leave that legacy with others, then my time here on earth has been well spent.
That's a great point, because I like when I speak in front of a school or a business, especially with the schools, if I have one little kid come up to me and shake my hand, say, Vin, thank you for what you did, and that happens, it's just, that's worth it to me, because we're very like-minded in that way too, where we're here to make a difference, make an impact, leave a legacy. But let's delve a little deeper here, Todd. Let's look 5 years. What do you got for us?
Well, in 5 years, my intention. So I'm a big believer in intention, not expectation. I think the world will smack us around pretty good when we live with expectations, because I just believe expectations are win-loss versus and both. So I'm going to go with my intention in 5 years is I'll be mentoring and working with people who are younger than me, teaching them how to coach others to be of value and of service to a greater global community. And I guess probably in 5 years, I'll be probably preparing for my stepdaughter's graduation party.
Oh, God. High school or college?
High school. My true intention for her is that she will graduate and go out and live a life of abundance. And ideally, hoping that the world gets back to it, is I'll be traveling the globe and making an impact and making a difference. but to say know exactly how that's going to go is probably a little bit of hubris at this point.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely think one day we may share the stage together and make a difference with one another because we share so many core beliefs. But Todd, thank you so much. I know our listeners are going to see all the value in your episode today. I enjoyed how you started right away, sharing that entrepreneurial journey at 12 years old, right? Like you had it in you from the beginning. You didn't just say, hey, I got 600,000 in debt. We spoke about the lack of communication to things and how you've improved it through great literature, using the resources in front of you. Tons and tons of value in this episode, Todd. So thank you for joining me. But it is time for the last word. Is there something you want to share with our listeners today that we did not get to touch on yet?
You know, I really think if you're an entrepreneur, you want to remember a couple of things. One, you want to focus on margin, not just on revenue. Revenue is great, but margin pays the bills and gets you $600,000 out of debt, as I can attest to. The second thing I always ask my clients, and I think this is the hardest question that I have to answer. So the hardest question I think is the question I want to leave your audience is, what do you want and why do you want it? And to say you want to make money is great, but why do you want to make money? Oftentimes it comes from something, a feeling maybe you felt lacking. You wanted more you didn't have. So if you can figure out what you want and why you want it, that will anchor in your core values. And then as you hire people, as you attract customers, they will believe in your core values. Just like Vin talked about today, you're going to find a like-minded group of people. You're going to create your own tribe. And then once you create your own tribe and you become a leader in that tribe, then the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. Todd, please share the rest of your professional social media website or ways for our listeners to follow your endeavors, request your services, or as he generously offered, to connect and seek advice.
You know, I would challenge anybody really, if you're thinking, hey, I might want to talk to Todd, take the leap of faith, reach out to me at todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com via my website. And I'm happy to give you 30 minutes, no charge, no strings attached, just to have a conversation about whether it's your imposter syndrome, life by design, what are you struggling with? Maybe I can be of service. I'm on Instagram, Todd Palmer 2. I have my Facebook page, Extraordinary Advisors. Any way to reach out to me. If you make the effort, I promise you have my assurances and my word that I will get back with you so that we can connect and have another conversation like I had with Vincent.
And the website is extraordinaryadvisors.com.
That's correct.
Great. And be sure to check out all that social media, the website, and be sure to reach out to him if you are in this entrepreneurial journey. You heard all the value today. I can't even imagine how much more you're going to get from him, so you need to make that phone call. Be sure to check out the show on Instagram and Facebook, though, at your favorite morning podcast, and we're on Twitter at Podcast by Lanci. Of course, my handles are at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube, and my site is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now. But DM me or email me because I want to hear what you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, please continue listening and rate what it's really like to be an entrepreneur 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering stories like Todd's for you on each episode. And as always, I'll end the show with a quote that inspired me and know it will for you too. And this one's from Colonel Sanders himself. He said, I made a resolve, then I was going to amount to something if I could. And no hours, nor amount of labor, nor amount of money would deter me from giving the best that there was in me. And I have done that ever since, and I win by it. I know. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on the next episode of What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur.